online or live or what have you. So please be patient with me as I walk through some of this stuff. First of all, I want everyone to take a deep breath. Exhale. There's a lot of energy in an environment like this, isn't there? There's a crowd mentality that reminds us that we are involved in a singular social organism and that we relate to each other on a very, very profound and deep level. And as profound as that is on one side, it can also be a little caustic and dangerous on another. If we get too caught up in things that, might move us in the wrong direction. But I don't see that happening here. But I do hope everyone can relax with me for a moment as I begin to speak this very brief but very detailed and intricate talk. As you all know, my name is Peter Joseph, and I work with an organization called the Zeitgeist Movement. Thank you. This movement was founded in 2008, and it's a sustainability advocacy group without country, without class, of course, without any religion or race. It is a global concept working to unify the human species and get it considered humane and actually sustainable. In the longer term interest, we actually seek something that I think many of you might share, which is the removal of the entire socioeconomic system itself. The details of which I'm going to express as I continue this talk. I pulled out some history books recently to see if I'd seen anything like this in basic modern history. Has there ever been a movement that actually goes against the financial and corporate powers on the scale and in the community globally ever? And there hasn't been. And that's a very telling sign as far as the awareness of the culture, wouldn't you say? So many people yell at political buildings and they work to try and engage their political establishment in the idea that actually is where the power resides in this world that we share, when it's very clear that the power is obviously within the financial structure and always has been. Even with the Great Depression, when I researched these issues, I found nothing that really went after the true powers that be. There's a man named John McMurtry, which some of you might be familiar with. He made a very unique analogy to where we are with the state of affairs. He stated that what we're seeing in the world today is actually the rise of the social immune system. Not the rise of a political ideology, but a rise of a defense mechanism coming from the very fabric of our culture that sees that something is extremely wrong and very, cancerous to society as a whole. And we, the social immune system, need to work to recognize the true root problem and then move to remove it as fast as possible before it takes hold and essentially, works for our own termination.
That's capitalism!
And as the cancer has grown since the inception of the system that I'm going to speak of, it's become more malignant, more caustic, and obviously across the world, absent of any country or nation or political party, we're beginning to see its caustic effects. However, just as the cancer in our bodies produce different symptoms that harm certain areas first, such as our lungs or our kidneys, we need to ask the question, where is the real sickness lying? I heard someone yell out capitalism a moment ago.
Capitalism!
But is that really the psychology that's underlying the problem that we see? Or is it simply a manifestation of something even more flawed at the foundational level? Are we actually seeing this cancer for what it is? Really working to correct it at the root source? Or are we just addressing its symptoms?
We are just addressing the symptoms.
This is the question I would like to pose not only to Occupy LA, but to the entire movement related, and all those that are worried about the state of affairs on this planet. How do we diagnose the real issue? How should we feel about the 1% which own 40% of the planet's wealth? How should we feel about the 400 Americans that have more wealth than 150 million Americans combined? How should we feel about the top hedge fund managers that take home over $300 million a year? And for what? Do these hedge fund managers actually create anything?
No!
Last I checked, the measure of our market system, which justifies its competitive nature, is that those who contribute the most to society are supposed to be the ones that are most rewarded. Obviously, the exact opposite is true. As a quick aside, I will state that if there's anything that could represent the tumor of the system that we inhabit, it would be Wall Street, the stock exchanges, and the banking establishment as a whole. But again, the tumors are not actually the source of this disease. They are symptoms. Symptoms, just as the rampant foreclosures forcing people out of their homes are symptoms. Symptoms like the ongoing economic decline and loss of so-called growth are symptoms. Symptoms like the ongoing debt crisis that has yet to fully hit America, by the way, but has already taken its toll in the EU, Greece, Italy, Portugal, and many others. And obviously no resolution has been found. Why? Because they're trying to resolve the problems that have been generated within this system by using mechanisms of this system. You notice our governments continue to bail out banks across the world, yet they impose austerity on us. Is that a result of something negative? Are these people just evil? Are they just trying to do the worst they can to insult the humanity of us? Are they just corrupt, greedy criminals, anomalies? Are they aliens from another planet that have come down to fuck with us? They're people, exactly. And they're likely manifestations of this cancer rather than a cause of it. And as the world awakens to this financial system and its flaws, I've noticed a very radical perspective slowly being realized, which transcends the economic tradition many of us assume to be natural to our way of life. You'll notice that we tend to assume that the systems we're born into, the traditional systems, are automatically assumed to be empirical. Have you ever noticed that? We might look at politics and government as we know it as a whole and assume that it's valid. Why? Because that's all we've ever known. Is it any true measure of logic? Probably not. It's simply tradition. It's custom. And you'll find that we seem to be locked into custom frames of reference than emergent frames of reference. And that is fundamentally what needs to change in our view of reality. We might look at the market system in our use of money, for example, and assume it will always be there, right?
No!
Not because of any benchmark of our, earthly economic measure of what it truly means to be sustainable. Not because of any scientific realization of what human behavior actually entails and how we tend to act based on what's reinforced in our culture, but simply because that's all we've ever known. However, as the biosocial pressures, as they're called, continue to grind down, say, the global workforce, as, machine automation continues to replace human labor for the benefit of saving corporations money, reducing purchasing power, your money, and hence inevitably stifling economic growth, our perspective might just grow a little bit larger than the traditional norms we've come to understand. Maybe, just maybe, human employment for income as we know it, something that I've heard in rhetoric a lot of people complaining about, where's our jobs? Maybe, just maybe, the foundation of our entire economic system simply isn't going to work anymore because we realize the non-stop effects of science and technology, hence the emergent nature of reality clashing with our traditional assumptions. And perhaps even with the expanding debt crisis born, guess what, out of the fractional reserve lending system and the structural reality that money is actually created out of debt and sold as a commodity in exchange for interest. Interests that can only come into existence, yes, through the creation of more loan sales and hence the creation of more money. Maybe, just maybe, the debt collapses aren't the result of some political policy or some corporate or government malfeasance. Maybe they are the result of the actual structural form of the system that we inhabit.
Slavery!
And with the psychology of growth and consumption, a psychology that continues to create the ongoing social and environmental destruction that we see, abuse and exploitation all around us, that so many environmentalists complain about, but yet they still tend to not realize that the system is based on that. It's defined by consumption. It's defined by turnover. And we often think that corporations should be held responsible for their actions because of their abuse of this nature, when in fact the competitive market model of economics demands that behavior. Again, it's structural. You know, how is it in a world that's supposed to be economizing? What is the definition of an economy? It means the management of a household. What does that mean? It implies that you have to be thrift. It means you economize. It means you save. It means you're strategic in what you do. How is an economy based on consumption to maintain your employment, economizing it all? Obviously, it's a complete anti-economy. You know, it's time we consider amongst all of this that the problems that we're seeing, that all of us are here about,